Hello, it's another glorious day in lockdown, a phrase I'm never going to tire of saying. And one of the things I've been thinking about this morning is to do with what difference we imagine this experience will make on our cultures. And by that I mean our national cultures, and I also mean our organisational cultures, because one thing we know for sure is that when we do experience cultural shifts, it's usually because something big has happened, and that might be a natural disaster, it might be a war, a collapse in the economy, a change in political system, a change in technology. And of course, a number of these things have been factors for us during this pandemic. So what are the differences likely to be? It's going to be impossible to predict. So I think really the main thing we need to take from this is to remember to tune in an open way, to really listen, to really empathise with one another, so that we can flex and adapt and really connect with people. And anyone who needs to lead or communicate across cultural barriers will need to adopt that as a mindset. So what is culture? I think one of the easiest ways really to define culture is to picture a pyramid, and to imagine that pyramid divided into three horizontal bands, and therefore at the bottom you've got the biggest band, and that's our traits as human beings, our universal traits. We're all to an extent defined by love and loss and fear and hunger, and we all run from dangerous animals, so those are our universal human traits. And then at the top of the pyramid, the very smallest part, those are our differences in individual personality. You know, children within the same family grow up liking different music and different TV shows and films, and they like to wear different clothes and express themselves differently. And so there are differences in individual personality that to an extent we're born with. They may also be environmentally influenced, but they are hardwired into us to an extent. And then in the middle, so between the universal traits and individual personality, you have the collective programming that one group possesses that's different to another. Those are our cultural differences. And how does that happen? What is that programming? Well, it's to do with what our parents tell us. It's what we learn from our teachers, from the role models and the heroes in our society. It's written into the stories that we pass on within our society. And some of those differences are visible and some are invisible. The visible ones are, they're really obvious. The houses are decorated differently. People wear different clothes, eat different foods. We can see it pretty quickly. And then other differences are less visible. A culture's attitude towards time. A culture's attitude towards, whether it makes its decisions individually or as a collective, for example. Its attitude towards leadership, its attitude towards the responsibilities of a society. Those are key differences that may not be immediately apparent. And the reason I think this is important to bear in mind is that sometimes we confuse the visible with the invisible. And that's what lies at the heart of being aware, being open, really listening and engaging with empathy. So to give you a very quick, very simple example, most cultures encourage good table manners in their children. That's an invisible cultural value. The visible manifestation of it, though, is different. So some cultures will eat with a knife and fork. Some will eat with their hands. Some will encourage silent appreciation during a mealtime. Others want you to slurp and make lots of noise to show how much you're enjoying the food. And what can happen is we see those visible differences, different ways of eating, for example, and we can assume that underneath those there is an invisible difference, a difference in value system, and that's why we reject it. And we experience, perhaps after a honeymoon phase where all of these differences are exciting, we start to experience a rejection of it. This is a different way of doing things and a different way of thinking about the world. Why can't I just go back to my own way of doing things? And actually I think quite interestingly our use of technology during this time is a good example. Many people in all of our social circles have talked about how amazing it is what you can do with video conferencing platforms, and yet they're also starting to reject them. And I just kind of want to communicate in the normal way now. I'm getting tired, physically tired, emotionally drained by this way of communicating. So my main point there is that really there will be, in all likelihood, some differences that we start to see in cultures. The assumptions of yesteryear may no longer hold true. What those differences are going to be is going to be very hard for us to predict. Instead, we all need to stay empathetic, to listen, and to engage wholeheartedly with one another, so that when we all come back together, we can do so with the maximum level of positivity. Thank you very much.